What up guys, but not to get you guys confused, for this crank bolt capture install and crank guard seal, I'm going to be using old clips from another video, and that video is the insane coolant system overhaul that I did. That video is over an hour and a half long, and that was part of that video, so I wanted to cut that out and make it its own video just for the people that wanted to see the crank bolt capture kit and the crank guard seal.
Okay. We'll do it live.
Okay.
No. We'll do it live!
So that's why it may look a little weird, and I'll mention what to take off only for that job. So it might seem like other things are out and have been disassembled and taken out of the vehicle, but don't mind that. Just pay attention to the things that I mentioned to take off for that job. So I wanted to give you guys a warning before we start with that video.
Now we'll go underneath the car and I'll show you guys the underside. The next thing that you're going to want to do while you're down here, you're going to want to remove the bolt that holds the transmission cooler onto the electric fan shroud. That will help removing the fan. So that does it for the bottom. We're going to go back on top and remove the rest of the bolts required to remove this fan shroud. Now you're going to want to remove this Torx bolt over here, which you can see there. There's the hole, the empty hole. I removed the Torx bolt there. Unplugged this connector here, so it was connected right there, so that's unplugged. And then there is a retaining clip right there, you can see right there. The electric fan shroud just drops into place there, so there isn't really anything to unbolt. It just pops out. You still have the coolant overflow hose that goes across here, so you're going to want to make sure you pop that out of place from those clips right there and on the other side. And then I also have, I believe this is for the hood release. Now in order to get this fan shroud out, because everything is now undone to get it out, these are just kind of in the way, but as opposed to the E90 and E80 chassis, we're going to be, which I already did, again I had a head start on this, undoing these Torx bolts. So you can see that I took this one out, this one out, and this one out on this side, and it's pretty much the same thing on this side. You can see that that one's gone, and this one's gone. So these you don't have to worry about. This can now just come right out, and you can see we have plenty of space here to remove the fan shroud. So that's an important detail that I wanted to show you guys. That will help a lot. So I'm going to move this to the back and kind of set all the bolts aside with it so that I know which bolts go to this shroud. And we'll move on to removing the electric fan. Now with the electric fan shroud out, you can see how much more room there is. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to remove these OEM inlets. So that'll give me even more space to take off the belt, replace the belt. The pulleys are fairly new, so I'm not going to be doing that, but I'm going to be replacing the crank hub pulley down there. You can see right there, because I'm doing the crank guard seal from VTT. I hate their products, but I'm going to be using that one along with the bolt lock kit while I'm down there. So I'm going to be putting those two items. All right, boys, so what I did now was remove the filter. So one of the dual cone filters on this inlet here. And then there are two Torx screws that mount right next to each other to kind of secure that inlet in place. Sorry guys, it's hard to see, but you can see the tabs going up there. So I removed those Torx bolts to loosen the inlet. And then this inlet also has these brackets that hold the hoses. So one of the hoses goes to the Mickey Mouse flange here. The other one routes down to the thermostat. This front inlet doesn't even really have a clamp here where it attaches to the turbo. So you can literally just pull it off. Once you pull it off the turbo there, then just make sure to turn the inlet upwards so the holes are facing you. That way you're able to maneuver it out of its original position and take it out, meaning you don't really have to cut it or anything. I'm just moving on to the belt, and as you can see, I took off the caps off of these pulleys and then loosened the bolts here. So with a T50, I also moved on to the crank hub pulley and loosened those E-Torx bolts. So those are also loose. Make sure that you loosen all of those bolts before you go on to the tensioner and release the belt, because it's going to be a lot harder loosening all those bolts with the belt off. I'll get that belt off and then we're going to move on to removing the crank hub pulley. We now have all the pulleys removed, so you can see where the tensioner was, where the idler pulley was, and also where the crank hub pulley was. It's kind of shifted to the side, but that crank guard seal is going to be mounted here, and there's two bolts right next to each other that we need to take out in order to install the seal guard. But you can see how dirty it is. You could definitely take some time to clean all of this. For me, it's even more dirty because of that oil spill that I had. So I'm going to take my time to also clean this area with some degreaser. You can see right here, just to give you a look at the tensioner, pulley, and crank hub pulley. Also, I did go overboard and I wasn't supposed to loosen that second bolt. It doesn't do any damage, but you only need to loosen this bolt. Now here are the two products that we're going to be installing while we're in there. So you can see on the right is the seal guard and on the left is the crank bolt capture. I do hate VTT. It's one of my least favorite companies for BMW, but it was a better deal to get the crank bolt capture and the seal guard together as a package. Otherwise, I would have just gotten the crank bolt capture and gotten a different seal guard, like the ECS tuning one. So I wanted to show you the two products. We're going to go ahead and install the seal guard. However, I don't know quite yet if I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the crank hub pulley, just because of that cleaning that I want to do in that area. I'll update you guys when I can. The crank guard seal is installed. Those bolts don't go on very tight, so you don't have to worry about tightening those. I did put just a dab of blue Loctite on each bolt just to be safe. So that's all done. Now the crank bolt capture system won't be installed quite yet. I am actually in the process of trying to refinish the crank hub pulley, or harmonic balancer is the proper name for this. I just want to get a coat of high temperature paint on it that also really adheres to the base, even if it was a little bit corroded, just to give it a clean look. And it's already out, so I thought I'd do that. I'm not going to try to put too many layers of paint, just because I know a lot of people have said that these are really finicky and are balanced from factory or something like that. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm not going to do too many layers of paint. Just so you guys know, I taped off the area of where the belt goes on, so it's all taped off. In case any of you are trying to refinish your harmonic balancer, just make sure you tape off that area. And I also taped off the other side of where it actually mounts onto the block, because I didn't really want to put any paint in that area since it's going to be bolted up to the block. Here we have the crank bolt capture kit and the harmonic balancer here. So I'm going to go ahead and throw on the harmonic balancer and then the bolt capture kit. It's pretty straightforward. The harmonic balancer goes on first, and then we go ahead and throw these on, and I'll let you know what to torque these down to. I'm just going to use blue Loctite here on these bolts. I'll show you guys once it's completed. Alright guys, so make sure you use an Allen bit here to get those bolts on. And before you even screw them in all the way, make sure that that crank hub capture is lined up with all the holes. So maybe take one bolt and try to screw it in into each one of the holes and make sure that it's going in properly before you go ahead and completely put each of them in. But just like a wheel, go crisscross on each one of them. Make sure they're all going down all the way evenly and tight. And then once you're done, torque them to about 20 foot-pounds or 25 foot-pounds, and also do crisscross on that torque sequence as well. And make sure that this harmonic balancer does not move when you're torquing them down and tightening them. So either have somebody else hold that harmonic balancer just to make sure that it doesn't slip or move when you're putting those on. So it's important that this harmonic balancer goes on nice and even and smooth. So just take your time with doing that. Do not try to rush it. But once you have it in, it's all set. And as you guys know, I did try to kind of cheaply refinish that harmonic balancer. I didn't put too many coats of paint on it, just one, just because it was looking really bad and I didn't want to spend $800 on another harmonic balancer. But now we're going to go ahead and put in the belt tensioner and idler pulley, just so we have those in, and then also put on the belt while we're at it. The idler pulley goes right here in this hole, and then the tensioner goes over here. So you'll guys see once I got those both in, and I'll show you, and then we'll move on to the belt orientation and how it goes. So with all the cleaning, this also got a little rusty here, which I don't like. I'll try to clean that up as well. But yeah, we're making some progress on this. Just kind of doing different things at a time. The tensioner, the idler pulley, and the belt are all on. So you can see the orientation of the belt here if you guys need that. I torqued down the bolts down to 40 Newton meters. So if you guys want to follow that, otherwise there are other specs online there. I think it ranges from like 38 to 60. I just went with 40. Worst case scenario, I'll hear some sound coming from the pulleys, but I think it should be fine. I did 40 on my other N54 car and it was perfectly fine. So this is all done. I'm just going to get the caps back on and the belt system should be good. The caps are now on and we can move on to the next thing. The fan is in. That's it for this. I have the radiator support back in as well as this little cover. So both of those things are in. Well guys, that's it for the video. I hope that helps you guys out, and I know that the crank bolt capture kit is a bit overkill for this car, but I did end up just getting it with the crank guard seal, so those are now both in the car. And yeah, a lot of people say that you can't even crank over the engine with that crank bolt capture kit anymore, so that is a downside, but at least I know that I'm taking an extra step measure to be safe with the N54 engine. So again, if you guys have any questions, let me know down below and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.